Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Adam Feiler on, and he's the VP of Partnerships at Minima Global. Hi, Adam.
Hello, Daniel.
How are we today?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good. Adam, should we jump straight in? Because I think this is going to be quite interesting. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yes, so I am head of partnerships at Minima, and Minima is a blockchain company that has managed to do almost the impossible by creating a application where everyone can run a full validating node on their mobile device. So this is bringing the power of blockchain to the people.
Wow. I'm slightly obsessed with blockchain ever since I sort of was introduced to it by a guest on the podcast. And it's phenomenal what this could potentially do. But how did you end up in blockchain?
Right. Well, yeah, it's a fairly unusual path. I'm a full professor in applied nanotechnology and have been a CTO in a biotech company. But I joined Minima last year because the company had grown to the point of becoming commercial. So they needed to focus on engagement with enterprise. And so I have joined the company to drive that business area to basically engage companies across a lot of industry verticals to actually find utility in blockchain. So, we've got to this very exciting period, 10 years after Bitcoin was introduced to the world, where we're now in a position of actually finding real utility, real use cases, and real value, and spreading this technology across the whole world.
It must be incredibly exciting to be involved in that. So, how did you sort of, become a professor? Obviously you went to university. Talk us through your whole kind of journey to where you are.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'll start at the beginning, which is my school in Cornwall. And the school is called Humphrey Davy. And Humphrey Davy was a chemist and a polymath. And I think that really did help inspire my love for chemistry. And that has driven me up until sort of at the end of my academic career. And so basically Humphrey Davy has fame for for inventing the Davy lamp, which saved thousands of people's lives in the mines, in the Cornish mines. There was a lot of explosions when the methane gas that was in the mines exploded because of the candlelight they were using. So he invented this lamp which had a gauze around the flame and stopped the heat propagating into and igniting the flames.
Oh, wow.
But apart from that, he did lots of other things, including discover electrolysis of seawater, and he has the most elements discovered by him. He was also a poet, a fisherman, and he invented laughing gas. So
Wow.
so he was a role model, and I loved the discipline, and I continued that through into my school and then university. And one of the things that Humphrey Davy did do was he worked at the Royal Institute or the Royal Institution. And one of his greatest discoveries of all wasn't an element; it was a person, which was Michael Faraday, and he's probably even more famous than Humphrey
Yes.
Davy. But after leaving school before university, I actually had the privilege of working there for 6 months, doing a research project. So my very first sort of non-school type work was working in this institute where we were using neural networks to look at properties of minerals for gas purification and things like that. So this was very, very early use of neural networks. And I didn't realize at the time that would be coming back to be important in my life. And equally, the study of minerals is something I ended up doing as I worked in a biotech company. So I was at Bristol University, and that has a very, very strong chemistry department. And so I did a degree there. And in my final year, I had a tutor who had a very good friend who was a director of a research institute in Australia. So I actually went to Australia to do my PhD.
Oh, wow.
And Australia is it was a great place to live. I lived in Adelaide and had a very fun time there. But interestingly, there's a very good culture of work hard and play hard. So both in the sort of sports arena, they're very competitive, but equally in the science that I was doing, there's a strong sort of friendly rivalry between towns and between universities. So there's a very sort of strong impetus of students to do well and be ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had good schooling and good education, and then was lucky enough to go to this very interesting research institute, the Ian Walk, and my PhD started off is sponsored by the mineral industry, as a lot of things are in Australia, and it started off as a very fundamental study of minerals useful for mining. But by the end of my PhD, it had evolved into the study of atomic forces and sort of lubrication and friction. So I've taken a very practical degree and turned it into quite an applied one, looking at sort of almost esoteric concepts of what atoms do when they interact with each other.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that was my sort of transition into applied research. And Australia is very good at that because there's a lot of wealth in the minerals and in farming and in the sea and the forest. So they have done a lot of good for actually combining disciplines across the science. So maths and physicists often work together, and biologists and social science, who actually have these sort of are called applied sort of interface disciplines, where you actually have learning from one discipline helping another. And I think that's sort of been one of the theme through my career, is really sort of joining dots between different areas of research.
I was going to say, it sounds very interesting, is that, you were heavily involved in these different fields within science, and then to sort of be where you are now, that's quite a journey, isn't it? So how did that develop into where you are now?
Exactly. So I finished my PhD and I came to Sweden, and I went through the academic field. I went as an assistant professor and then a full professor, and I transitioned from chemistry to pharmacy by moving from one university to another. And for the last 8 years, I've been CTO in a biotech company, and we have taken pharmaceutical products to the market. So the two big areas that I'm very proud of that part of my career. I started when the company was 5 people, and we had a research paper and a good idea. And when I left, by the time I left, we were about 25 people, and we had succeeded in industrial manufacture of a purification media that is used in insulin production. And the whole premise of the company was to reduce the cost of producing pharmaceutical products, because this particular step in the process of making this protein drug is really, really expensive. So by reducing the cost even by 10%, suddenly gives access of this drug to another billion people. So
Wow.
it has a huge benefit when you can reduce the cost of manufacture. So that was one area that I was working on, and then the other was actually drug formulation. So I've been very interested in bacteria and diseases associated with lung, and one of the areas that I started working on was TB. So the function that we were producing in the biotech company was to basically reformulate existing drugs, again as a way of making it cheaper and more accessible. So rather than go through the full process of discovering clinical trials, we were screening drugs that had some potential, and then just through formulation improving their effectiveness through improving their bioavailability. So I'd got to the stage in the company where we'd tested a number of drugs for a number of diseases. And it was clear at that point that it took another skill set. I mean, I had gone from managing in a research institute, managing a lab and lots of people under me, but by the time you get to clinical trials, then you do need people with that experience of taking drugs to market. So it was basically a good time in my career to pivot and to move on. So I decided that I would. Minima had been founded in 2018, and as I said in the intro, it is a very exciting moment to be working in blockchain, because we really believe we've cracked it. We have solved the three biggest challenges in blockchain technology, scalability, security, and speed. And we've achieved this by allowing everyone to have a full validating node on their device.
It's fascinating that you've gone from where you started to where you are. And how does that skill set you built help you to do and develop partnerships for Minima? Because to me, that sounds like different kinds of skill sets, but obviously it's working for you.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. I mean, I would have said last year that, my main skill was organizing research and driving research, but I did a lot of business development in my former job without realizing it. I applied for tenders for applications. I also presented in big, large conferences, and was talking to decision makers, very high up in pharmaceutical companies. So a lot of that was business development. In that role, one of the key features, of course, is being able to give almost a layman's description of a technical solution. So it's being able to almost describe quite complex theory into practical examples that people can understand. So that I think is the skill set that I took with me. And regarding the partnerships with Minima, I mean, we are now really ambitious with our reach. We're looking to engage global companies with hundreds of millions of users on in their particular fields, and demonstrate that Minima can solve a lot of the issues that they are having. So I can go a little bit more detail into the industry verticals, but one early point to mention is that blockchain isn't right for everything, and just as it is very important to see when blockchain can help, we also need to be mindful that people often mistake some of the things that blockchain should and shouldn't be doing. And one of those, of course, is if you have got a private ecosystem, and you've just got connection between devices in your own private network, you may not need a blockchain at all. The database is 1,000 times faster and 1,000 times cheaper. So it's also very important from credibility perspective to really understand what the problem is you're trying to solve with blockchain, and why for that particular function it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to be really interested by this conversation if we could go into a bit more detail on the different verticals, because I think we've all heard a lot about blockchain, and certainly those of us that have read into it and sort of started to grasp an understanding what it could potentially do. But hearing from someone like yourself as to which verticals it could actually be applied to would be really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So again, the offer of Minima is that every person can run a full node on their device. The way we do that is by basically streamlining and shrinking down the information that you need to store to secure the chain. So instead of everyone storing an entire copy of the blockchain, in fact, all you need to do is just store the data that's relevant for yourself. So you store the data relevant for your coins, for your transactions, and you send messages that are just a hash of the state of the blockchain. So a lot of the focus in Minima is really for the people and what we can do with it. But in terms of my work, it's looking at these large enterprises. And the first one to mention is mobility, and that encompasses vehicles, cars, micromobility, any form of transport where there is a need to have security of data and efficiency of data transfer between vehicles. So I am living in Sweden, and in the south of Sweden, there's a collective of the Swedish OEMs, including the likes of Volvo, Polestar, and their electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And what is key to them, of course, is safety and security. Safety of the passengers in the car and security of, again, the passengers, but more and more increasingly, data security. So as all cars are becoming electrified, and the future of cars are going to be car sharing as a service, it's really important for them that the data that is transferred between their vehicles is, utmost secure. So blockchain here offers a solution. And by having a unique node running on each vehicle, you can truly have an immutable transaction of truth between two devices. And because Minima has successfully achieved a decentralized network, there's no single point of failure. Mm-hmm. So instead of having a server that is responsible for distributing the data across the network, instead you have this data transmitted point to point, so node to node. So that has two benefits. One is that you remove any risk of hacking or false transactions being implemented across the chain. And the mm-hmm. other is a huge efficiency, because you don't have to have nodes always communicating with the centralized server. And it also brings efficiency of communication. So this is, it is an area in which actually blockchain once got highly promoted with the likes of IOTA. A few years ago, they were quite popular, and a lot of people thought that they'd actually got an extremely good product. And there was quite a lot of news in combination with several of the global car manufacturers that were looking at using a blockchain such as IOTA for their transmission of data. Mm-hmm. In the end, they've now sort of ended up almost being forgotten, and it didn't quite work, their method of consensus. But that was an industry where it was quite quickly seen that there was a real benefit for using blockchain technology. So again, the interesting thing is this is a real IoT or machine to machine type interaction. When you've got nodes on vehicles, and you can just trust that by definition, the transmission of the data between the two vehicles is censorship resistant and gives you the immutable time stamped truth of that interaction, then you don't need to continually query that network and keep on looking to see if this data is secure. So one of the applications, so there's several areas several use cases. One mm-hmm. is access control or delegated access control. So, for example, if you are a car OEM that has a fleet of cars, the future will be when people no longer own their own cars; they'll simply rent a car as a service. And mm-hmm. you would like to be able to quite easy, you'd hopefully like to just simply turn up on a street, use a phone as a key application, and just get access to the nearest car that you choose. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to be able to delegate access and make sure that only the person that has the right to enter the car does this. So there is extensive technology out there already using phones to unlock cars, as people know, but mm-hmm. the challenge is, again, this sort of centralized method in which the keys are generated and in which people use it. So again, Minima has an extreme advantage because each person has a unique node ID. So when you are generating a token which then gives you access to unlock the car, it can't be anywhere. You can't fake it. So a token can be really thought like a physical object, which it can't be in two places at once. So you've got the security of having your node ID hopefully on your person, on your phone, and then the token that is generated by this node embeds the node ID. So you have this extreme level of security because you simply can't generate a second version of that key.
So it's essentially going to allow us to, as we look towards the future and we say, cars as a service and things like that, everyone gets very excited, but the security implications behind it are vast, aren't they? And having a solution like this to be able to sort that out removes so many barriers.
It does. Exactly right. And what's so exciting for us is that it is that the general security is propagated by every application we can find. So the underlying base protocol is secured by users. So by onboarding, new different industry verticals, they can piggyback on the security provided by other users. So in another use case, we are, heavily involved in Web3 applications, NFTs, and the likes. And I can a bit more explanation about that. But what we're saying is that even if you've got two very disparate verticals, they're still benefiting from the same value, which is a very secure chain. Because if you have 1 million users on the network, it's almost impossible to underpin or undermine that the security of that chain.
So essentially, the more users you get, the more secure it becomes. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Wow.
And the one thing I failed to mention at the beginning is that we are a POW-based protocol, and this is really, really important for us. And this is one of the distinctions. So it's very topical at the moment. Those who follow the industry will know there's just been an ETH merge, where Ethereum has moved from a POW chain to a POS chain. We are POW, and we believe that is absolutely essential to give security. So for those who don't know the difference, POS is proof of stake and POW is proof of work. And proof of work for us means you actually have to do something to make something valuable. So you actually have to put in energy, you have to do work, and then you get the value added by the blockchain. In the staking scenario, you're simply assuming that just because you put in money, then you give something value. And the trouble with staking is that, as we have seen, the number of people that are staking are getting smaller and smaller. So we're tending to a more centralized consensus mechanism. So in the past, when everybody could mine on their laptops and they could use small devices, then you had a very distributed system in which people could validate blocks. Now, of course, it's gone into the hands of a few. You have these large mining servers, and that is becoming a centralized system. So Minima will never become centralized. Minima will always become it will remain as a decentralized protocol. And importantly, the adding more users doesn't add any more burden to the network, because everyone is responsible for just doing the work needed for their own transactions. So you can onboard, let's say, another 1,000 IoT devices, and that will add no further burden, because the work that's done to secure the chain is done at the edge of the network. So we have that. So we have that principle driving Minima, and the Web3 applications are interesting. I mean, NFTs, they have had a sort of a hype, and some of the things that have started the hype, of course, have now dramatically lost their value and reputation. But the concept of an NFT is still very important. I mean, literally an item, a digital asset that can't be replicated, is proving to be very valuable, similar to a single access token or a ticket for entry, but equally, artwork or valuable digital assets.
I think the thing that excites me about NFTs is maybe not the real world applications, but as Web3 develops and things like the Metaverse and such develop, to me, and I could be naive with this whole thing, but I think that is where maybe the value will start to come when we sort of jump into the metaverse a bit more, and digital assets are used on a daily basis, maybe.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the hype of the monkey faces has attracted attention, but all new technology goes through hype cycles. So
Mm,
even though a lot of people may just think that they are nonsense, the principle that gain um, their favor, of course, as you said, is now proving that people will have real value in the metaverse. And for us, again, the value of everyone having a node that is equal on the protocol means that suddenly you're in a position where you can auction your NFTs, and you can sell your NFTs just point to point. So there doesn't need to be an intermediary third party. So if you want to sell your digital asset, you can do that and between two people, and no one else needs to come in the middle to validate these.
mm.
So there's a lot of opportunity. And as you said, I mean, as we start to find commercial application in the metaverse, I mean, we're going to start seeing digital twins for everything we can imagine. So it will creep into our daily lives. That is for sure.
What's your take on the metaverse? Just sort of a sideline question here. I'm fascinated by it because it does seem in some ways to be the way the world's going in the future, but I struggle to sort of visualize it or think in what applications it'd be used apart from, I don't know. I'm just the concept in itself. What will the metaverse actually be? What will actually be commercially viable in the metaverse? What's your opinion on it?
Mm. Well, I'm old enough to remember a day that this didn't exist, and it still for me is a concept which I have to almost say, do we want to go down that route? But it is
Mm,
happening. My I have kids who are immersed in the digital world, and for them, it isn't such a big transition. Whereas for me and my friends, we remember the days where we just went out and played in real life. So
mm,
I think that very soon it won't, it'll become less of a question. It will just be an extension of our reality. And it's going to get more and more immersive. It's going to get more and more real. And why wouldn't you choose to look at some, augmented reality of an object if it, helps you understand something or gives extra
mm,
value? So I'm not resisting it, and I see the value, but I am also slightly observing from the outside, looking at this development, thinking, is all of it necessary and is all of it good? But it is happening at a very fast pace. Clearly, a lot of functions like shopping, sharing things. It's accelerated and aided by metaverse applications, and equally, it does, in one sense, bring equality to people. So it does basically shrink the differences between where you live and your material values in different countries, because you can come to metaverse and have a virtually level playing field. So
mm,
there are, yeah, I think you can also name a lot of commercial applications. So it's got certainly, I'd say, a lot more advantages and disadvantages in terms of commercial activities. Whether or not that is the end of our evolution in terms of interacting with the outside world, the material world, I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think people will be listening to this, and especially around the whole hype of the blockchain industry, for want of a better word. But people listen to it and thinking, do you know, okay, how would I even begin to get into this industry? What kind of jobs are going to exist? I'm aware it's quite an open-ended question, but could you give us a few sort of thoughts on, how people could begin to get into blockchain, maybe?
Absolutely. And yeah, and this is actually very interesting because I mean Minima is so strong because of the diverse experience and knowledge of the people that work there. But I mean clearly coding is a big thing. Clearly, anyone who's interested in coding, in scripting, computer science, and that has still we're still in its infancy, really, in terms of the code, in terms of protocols that are being written. So that is always going to have good potential. People have that career, but equally, as we're now talking, it's more applications and utility and uses that are finding traction. So there is a lot of marketing that is involved, and a lot of social media. Communities are absolutely critical, of course, in building up traction and sharing the types of developments that are taking place. So a lot on social media. I mean, we're particularly interested in the benefit added to artists and creative pursuits. So the digital art is one form, but equally you can create music albums, and you can have a way of sharing this between your fans. So loyalty comes into this, and curating your own persona means that basically you are very much free to explore and to develop tools that you would like in your professional life. So I think that career paths don't necessarily, exclude you from getting involved. And as we see, more and more applications are going to be built on Metaverse, where you can, use skills from a completely different area. I mean, another interesting development for us is looking at tokens for promoting activities such as choosing good food products. So a particular use case that's just come recently up is a token that will use global farm metrics to give the quality of food based on a number of parameters, such as the distance traveled or the way it's been farmed. And tokenization allows people to be able to distinguish the quality between products and get a sort of a loyalty point for the choice of your product. So you can start seeing that it's going to creep into all types of applications. And we're doing a lot of work also with initiatives in Africa where micropayments is of course absolutely critical to be able to have a functioning economy. And we can gamify, or we can add loyalties to particular methods of farming, for example, that benefits everyone. So I wouldn't say that. I mean, I say no is an amazing opportunity, and that you shouldn't feel that you were excluded because you didn't just do computer science at school, for example.
Yeah, no, great point. And then looking at your career as a whole, what's been the biggest positive for you? What's been the thing you've gone, oh, I'm so glad I did that in my career?
Well, I think for me it was the transition from fundamental research towards applications. I mean, that has really given me the benefit when you're testing ideas by actually trying it for real. So in my previous job, I worked in a research institute, and we had a lot of contract work for companies such as Unilever and GSK and Procter and Gamble. So for example, in the food space, or in the health care space, there was a lot of work that we did where we took scientific concepts and then translated into practical outcomes. So that I think has been a big one of the things that I would take home as a positive from my career. And now we're doing it digitally. We're taking concepts and then we're saying, how do you translate that into practical outcomes?
And then on the flip side of that, what's been the biggest challenge for your career?
Um, well, I think I have always felt um well, how do you put it? There's one terminology which is in imposter syndrome. I mean, I've always felt
Mm,
I haven't quite done enough, or I haven't quite got to that level, or I pit myself against others and said, oh, maybe I'm not quite as good as they are. So I think but that has been a driving force as well. Really go that extra mile, really sort of put in the work, really understand. Do I know? Am I credible? Can I stand for what I am saying? So I think that has been a challenge, just because through ambition and through want to really continue to be at the peak of my game. I felt I need to, make sure that I'm always striving to learn more or understand better.
definitely. So throughout your whole career, I think it's been really interesting that you've gone from, being quite scientific, probably how way to describe this, um, research based
Yeah,
into the business development side. I
yeah,
think, out of all the podcasts we've recorded, I've never seen that mixed together. And I find that fascinating that you've been able to go from one to the other, because on paper, and I think in reality, a lot of the time, it's a very different skill sets.
yeah.
So, what do you think personality wise has helped you to do that?
Well, I think part of good business development is understanding what the customer needs. And it's also being able to clearly and honestly define what the service is that you're providing. So you need to find that match. You need to be and you need to be creative. You need to be resourceful. You need to be able to um, uh, project what good could look like. If you are serving, and understand that you might be a long way at the beginning from what they need and what you can provide, but being able to paint that picture of what it'll look like when it's finished. So you need that credibility. You need to be able to, as I said, almost put in layman terms the benefit of the product you're selling. And equally, it's again, taking lessons learned from other areas and applying it to a new application.
Mm, no, great answer. And to wrap this up, would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yes, absolutely. I think that I have pivoted my career at important milestones. And I think that where I am now is exciting, fun, and rewarding. And I'm very happy, that I got to this position of where I am now. I don't, of course, think that I could have predicted that 5 years ago, but I think that the opportunity for the benefit of this type of technology is going to add such value to us globally that it is something that I am very passionate about.
Well, Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you and Minima?
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm on LinkedIn, Adam Feiler, and also at Minima. So Minima is you can look under the website, which is minima.global. We're also on Telegram and we have Discord channels. And we are currently we're just preparing for our mainnet launch. So that will happen at the beginning of next year. And as I mentioned, we've got this great user base. We currently have 300,000 users running Minima at the moment, just in testnet. So we actually have more full validating and constructing nodes than all other blockchains combined.
Wow.
So please, if anyone's interested, do go to the Minima website, download the APK, which installs a node on your phone, and let's join the movement.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, very nice. Thank you. Bye.